Today, we uncover the mysteries of Viking afterlife beliefs through a sweeping saga filled with gods, giants, and heroes who confront Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. This narrative explores how dying in combat was not an end, but a passage to Valhalla, where eternal battle and feast prepare the warriors for the final cosmic fight. Discover the profound meaning of courage, sacrifice, and hope woven into the Viking spirit. The fjord was quiet that morning, save for the rhythm of waves lapping against the wooden pier. A grey fog had settled along the water's surface like a shroud, muffling the usual cries of gulls and distant crack of ice breaking on the shore. The village of Skjoldvik, nestled between towering pine forests and the cold embrace of the North Sea, stood in silence. At the heart of this silence lay a longship, its dragon-headed prow jutting toward the heavens. Upon the deck of the ship, beneath a cloak of woven furs and iron-studded leather, lay Havard the Red, slayer of men, champion of 3 raids, father of 4 sons, and guardian of the village for over 2 decades. He had fallen in the shield wall 5 days ago in a violent clash against the men of the south. His axe had struck true, cleaving helms and armor, but in the final moments, a spear had found its way into his side, and his blood had soaked the muddy snow. Now, his body lay lifeless, but in the hearts of the people, he burned brighter than ever. The funeral had drawn everyone from the neighboring lands, warriors with braids thick as ropes, shield maidens with grim expressions, even children who stared with wide eyes, sensing the importance of the moment. It was not just a farewell to a man. It was a passage, a journey, a rite of transition into the realm of gods and legends. Elders spoke of Havard's deeds in great detail. The night he broke into a Saxon keep and emerged with a necklace said to be blessed by Freya herself. The winter when wolves descended upon Skjoldvik and he held the gate for a full night with nothing but a broken spear. But beyond all stories, beyond even the blood spilled in honor, it was his death in combat that mattered most. To the Norse, to die with sword in hand, eyes open, and breath heavy with war, was the path to Valhalla. In the great hall of Odin, said the elder priestess, a silver-haired woman named Skuld, Havard shall feast. The mead will flow from golden horns, the benches will be lined with the fallen, and the Valkyries shall bring him meat and mirth each night. The crowd murmured in reverence. They had heard the tales since childhood. Valhalla, the hall of the slain, where warriors who died bravely were gathered by the Valkyries, the shield maidens of Odin. There, the fallen would fight and die again each day in glorious combat, only to rise again, wounds healed, to feast until Ragnarok, the end of all things. But not all would go to Valhalla. Skuld reminded them of this. Only those whom the Valkyries choose, those who die with honor, who do not flee, who meet death with laughter and a blade, only they shall find their place beside the All-Father. As the villagers watched, Skuld placed a sprig of yew upon Havard's chest and whispered an invocation to Odin, to Freya, to the ancestors who watched from beyond. Then she raised her hand, and with it, the signal was given. Flames were lit at the base of the ship. Tar-soaked wood caught quickly. The fire roared, orange tongues licking upward like the breath of a dragon. The villagers sang as the smoke rose, deep, guttural chants that echoed through the pine-covered hills and across the fjord. A song of war and glory, a song to guide Havard's soul to the other side. His eldest son, Eric, stood nearest the shore, his fists clenched, jaw tight. Though the tears in his eyes betrayed him, he did not cry aloud. He knew that his father would not want weeping. He would want a promise that his death would be avenged, that the axe would not rust, and that the path to Valhalla would remain open for all brave enough to walk it. Beside Eric stood his younger brother, Sigmund, still barely 17, winters old. He had never fought in a raid, never known the rush of steel against steel. But now, in the fire's glow, he saw what death in battle truly meant. "It's not the end," he whispered to himself. "It's the beginning." In that moment, Sigmund made a vow. He would not die in his bed like a sheep. He would take up the axe. He would earn the favor of the gods. He would meet his fate in combat, with a roar on his lips and blood on his blade. For beyond this world, beyond the ice and sea and stone, lay the halls of the gods, and only through fire and steel could one reach them. As the ship's hull cracked and collapsed under the heat, and the body of Havard the Red was taken into the flames, the villagers knew they had not lost a man. They had sent a warrior to Valhalla. The smoke from Havard's funeral pyre had long since vanished into the grey northern sky, but its memory lingered in the hearts of those left behind. Days passed, and then weeks. Snow blanketed Skjoldvik in silence once more, muffling the world like a woolen cloak. Yet beneath the hush, something had awakened, something ancient, something stirring in the soul of Sigmund, son of Havard. He had not spoken much since the funeral, but his eyes had changed. No longer the gaze of a youth hungry for stories and dreams, his stare was hard now, like flint. He trained in the early hours of morning and into the blackness of night, swinging his father's axe until his hands bled and froze and bled again. Eric, his elder brother, watched in silence. He, too, had taken the weight of legacy, but it was Sigmund who bore it like fire in his chest. In the longhouse, where warriors gathered to drink and speak of glories past, the old seeress Skuld returned one evening as the wind howled like wolves outside. She wore robes of raven feathers and carried a twisted staff carved with runes too old for most to decipher. Her voice when she spoke was like cracking bone. The Valkyries ride tonight. The hall fell still. Even the drunkest man at the fire grew quiet. It was not a threat. It was a warning. There is a stirring in the 9 realms. The gates of Valhalla tremble. A war brews beyond Midgard, and Odin sends his maidens to search once more. Someone dared to ask, why here? Skuld's eyes, clouded and pale, turned toward Sigmund. Because one among us will be chosen. That night, Sigmund dreamt of wings. He stood alone on a plain of snow and blood. The sky above him was torn by black clouds and lightning that cracked like spears hurled from the gods. Around him, fallen warriors groaned, their bodies broken, armor shattered. And then he heard it. A sound unlike anything he'd known before. It was the scream of a hawk, the clang of swords, and the cry of a woman in battle all at once. From the storm descended a figure, tall, fierce, clad in a cloak of feathers and bronze. A Valkyrie. Her eyes glowed like the heart of a forge, and in her hand she carried a long spear etched with gold. She looked at him, not through him, not around him, but into him, and nodded once. You are seen. Then she was gone, rising into the sky, leaving the world behind. Sigmund awoke in sweat and silence, his fingers still curled as if holding a blade. He did not speak of it, not even to Eric, but he knew. The Valkyries had come, and they had looked upon him. The next morning, he left the village. Eric caught him at the gate, snow in his beard, worry in his eyes. You don't need to do this. I do, Sigmund replied. You're not ready. I won't become ready sitting by the hearth, Eric. I have to earn it. He carried only what he could strap to his back. His axe, a small round shield, dried fish, and a horn carved with his father's name. Skjoldvik watched him go, silent once more, as its youngest son stepped into the wilderness with only the gods as company. For weeks, Sigmund walked. He crossed icy rivers, scaled cliffs that scraped the sky, and walked paths older than memory. He encountered wolves, frost giants of rumor, and traders who told him of raids to the south, of kings gathering armies, of omens in the skies. At night, he would sit by his fire, staring into the flames, whispering prayers to Odin, to Thor, to Tyr, the gods of war and honor. He left small offerings, a tooth from a wolf he slew, a carving of a ship, a strand of his own hair wrapped in birch bark. He hoped the gods were watching. He needed them to watch. Then, on the 40th night, he came upon an ancient burial mound. It rose like a hill from the earth, covered in moss and snow, its surface etched with runes worn by time. At the base was a stone door, half buried, half rotted. He should have turned back, but something called to him. Inside, the air was cold and dry, untouched by wind or warmth. Bones lay stacked in the corners, armor rusted to nothing, and torches long dead. But at the center stood a throne of stone, and upon it a body still armored, still whole, as if death had only just come. Sigmund knelt before it. "I am Sigmund, son of Havard. I do not ask for gold. I do not ask for power. I ask only for a sign." He waited. Then from the shadow came the whisper of feathers. The room lit with an otherworldly glow. From the stone above, the shape of a woman descended, not flesh, but spirit, her form shifting like smoke, her eyes twin stars. "You seek the path to Valhalla," she said. He nodded. "You seek to die with honor." "Yes," he whispered. "Then you must live first. You must prove yourself in blood, in fear, in fire. Only through struggle does the soul become worthy." She lifted a hand. A rune appeared on his chest, seared into his skin without pain. The mark of the Einherjar, the fallen chosen of Odin. "You are marked, but not yet claimed. Earn it." And just like that, she vanished. Sigmund left the mound before dawn, snow falling silently around him. He felt no warmth, but he burned inside. He would go south. He would join the wars, the raids, the battles that would test his spirit. He would face the might of kings and the darkness of men. And he would do so with laughter on his lips and the song of steel in his hands. For now, he knew he had been seen, and that was the first step toward eternity. The winter road to the south was unkind. Snowdrifts rose as tall as a man, and the wind clawed at Sigmund like a jealous ghost. He wrapped himself in wolf pelts and pushed forward, guided by instinct and fire, both the one in his gut and the one he built each night to stay alive. Days blurred into each other. The mountains gave way to valleys where frost lingered in silence. He met no one, not a soul, until the forest turned thin and the smell of wood smoke and steel reached his nostrils. It was the camp of Jarl Kettil, war chief of the Broken Horns, a famed warband that wandered the borderlands of the southern Jarldoms. Known for raiding Saxon outposts and slaughtering without mercy, they were feared even over Norsemen. Sigmund approached their camp at dawn, alone, ragged, eyes hard with purpose. The guards lifted spears toward his throat. "I come to fight," he said. "Take me to your Jarl." The guards laughed. One, a hulking brute with one eye and a twisted grin, jabbed at Sigmund with the butt of his spear. "You'll fight when we're done skinning you." Sigmund didn't hesitate. With a roar, he pivoted, grabbed the spear mid-jab, twisted it free, and slammed it against the man's chest, so hard he collapsed backward. Another lunged at him with a blade, but Sigmund ducked, drove his elbow into the man's ribs, and swept him to the ground. He raised the spear, holding it like the weapon it was meant to be. "Take me to your Jarl," he growled again, this time coated in ice. By midday he was brought before Jarl Kettil, a man with braided white hair, scars over his scalp, and a silver wolf tooth hanging from his neck. His voice was low, like distant thunder. "You think this is a clan for lost boys? I don't need orphans who run from hearthfires hoping to die pretty." "I didn't run," Sigmund said. "I'm here to fight, to prove myself. I don't fear death." Kettle looked him over, eyes narrowing. "That so?" He tossed Sigmund a sword, blunt-edged and notched. Then he barked an order. From the side, another man stepped forward. He was larger, older, scarred from chin to chest. "This is Ulf. If you can stand after 3 exchanges with him, you can eat at my fire. If you can't, we'll leave your bones for the crows." The duel began. Ulf was fast for a man his size. His blows came like thunderclaps, wild and relentless. Sigmund dodged barely. He used his smaller frame to duck and weave, striking only when he saw an opening. And even then, the blows barely made Ulf flinch. He blocked a brutal overhead strike that knocked him to his knees, but he rolled away from the follow-up and slammed his shoulder into Ulf's gut. It wasn't enough. Ulf grabbed him by the hair, yanked him back, and spat into the snow. "You'll die before the sun falls, boy." But Sigmund saw red. He remembered Havard's pyre. He remembered the Valkyrie. And he rose, not as a boy, as a wolf. With a scream that shook the camp, he lunged, parried Ulf's next blow, then drove his sword's pommel into the man's face. Once, twice, 3 times. Blood burst. Ulf staggered. Sigmund roared and slammed his foot into Ulf's chest, sending him crashing into the snow. Silence. Jarl Kettle stood. A long pause passed before he nodded. "You'll fight with us." And just like that, Sigmund was no longer a wanderer. He was a warrior. The weeks that followed were filled with blood. They raided coastal monasteries, burned Saxon villages, and carved their way through enemy camps. Sigmund took his share of scars, an arrow through the thigh, a deep cut across his shoulder, but never wavered. He killed not with cruelty, but with purpose. He honored the code of his people. Fight with glory, die with honor. In the nights, the warriors feasted on mead and meat, roaring songs to Thor and Odin. They carved runes into their shields and painted symbols on their faces. Sigmund did not yet laugh as they did. His fire still burned too cold, but he listened. He learned, and he dreamed. The Valkyrie returned, again and again, in his sleep. Each time, she stood beside a battlefield, her cloak whipping in the wind, her eyes glowing. "You are walking the path," she would say, "but it is not yet time." One night, around the fire, a warrior named Hrolf asked, "Do you ever think of what comes after?" "After death?" Sigmund asked. "Aye. You think we really end up in Valhalla?" Sigmund looked into the flames. "If we die well, if we die in battle, that's the way of things." "But what if we die a different way?" Hrolf asked. "What if our death doesn't come with swords and fire? What then?" The silence that followed was thick. "Then we go to hell," said One-Eyed Bjorn, "the land of the dead, where no glory lives. A cold world beneath the roots of Yggdrasil. No mead, no song, only shadows." Hrolf shivered. "I'd rather burn on a ship." Sigmund didn't answer. But that night, he prayed harder than ever. Not for survival, but for a worthy death. The battles grew fiercer. One dawn, they were ambushed. The Saxons had learned their paths, and when the warband crossed a frozen bridge near the River Wye, the enemy struck from both sides. Arrows rained. Men fell. Steel clanged. Sigmund stood in the thick of it, swinging his axe like a whirlwind. He watched Hrolf die beside him, smiling as a sword pierced his belly. He saw Bjorn take 3 spears and fall laughing. And when he felt the edge of an enemy blade carve across his ribs, he did not retreat. He advanced. With blood pouring from his wounds, Sigmund dragged himself across the frozen bank, felling the last of the attackers. By dusk, the few survivors of the broken horns limped into a cave and hid from the falling snow. Ketil had lost an arm. Sigmund had nearly lost his life. But in the firelight that night, the Valkyrie came again. You do not flee. You do not break. Soon your time will come. He dared to ask her, "Will I see my father?" She smiled. "In the halls of gold and glory, when the horn of Ragnarok calls, you shall fight beside him again." He wept then, silently, not for pain, not for fear, for belief. The gods were real. The stories were real. The afterlife was real. And Sigmund was walking the path toward it. Not yet a god, not yet an Einherjar, but chosen. Snow fell endlessly, blanketing the blood-stained world in silence. After the ambush at the River Wye, what remained of the broken horns was a shadow of its former self. Jarl Ketil, now crippled, appointed Sigmund his second-in-command. There had been no argument. Even the oldest warriors saw what Sigmund had become. Not a boy, not just a warrior, but a man, shaped by steel and shadow, marked by the gods. But in the days that followed, something changed in the wind. It came softly at first, a stillness that was not peace, a cold that was not of the season. The birds no longer called in the morning. The howls of wolves had stopped at night. The trees, tall and ancient, leaned inward as if whispering among themselves. They called it Vega Heljar, the road to hell. It was Eric who found them. One evening, as the sun bled red over the mountains, a lone rider approached the camp. Sigmund was sharpening his axe when he looked up and locked eyes with a figure wrapped in furs, mud-caked and weary. "Brother," Eric said. Sigmund dropped the axe. They embraced without words. Eric had come from Skjoldvik, where darkness had crept into the fjord like rot. Livestock had died. Children were born still. An illness clung to the village, and the elders said the balance had been broken. No one knew why, but they whispered that someone had opened the gates to the realm of hell. Sigmund felt his blood freeze. "You came all this way to find me." "You're the only one who's seen the Valkyries," Eric replied. "You've seen more than the rest of us." That night, under the crackling fire, Sigmund shared the truth he had hidden. About the mound, about the rune carved into his chest, about the Valkyrie who had claimed him, about the dreams of the Golden Hall, and the whispers of a darker world below it. Eric listened in silence. Then, as the flames flickered low, he asked, "Do you think it's real? Hell?" Sigmund stared into the dark forest beyond the fire. "I know it is." And so they went north again. Not back to Skjoldvik, not yet, but toward the place that haunted every warrior's deepest fears. The gate that led to Helheim. The underworld ruled not by fire, not by glory, but by silence. A realm where cowards, oathbreakers, the unchosen dead wandered forever. Few believed the gate truly existed in the mortal world. Fewer still dared seek it. But the old sagas spoke of a place deep in the heart of the Nidar woods, where snow never melted and trees grew in twisting, unnatural shapes. There, a great chasm opened in the earth, guarded by a beast with blood in its teeth and sorrow in its eyes. There, the living could glimpse what waited beyond an unworthy death. The journey was long. They passed ruined shrines to Thor, covered in moss, stones carved with runes marking ancient graves, bones of travelers who had never returned. As they walked deeper, the world seemed to bend. Time lost meaning. Stars wheeled overhead in unnatural patterns. Eric grew pale, feverish, muttering in his sleep. On the 9th day, they found it, a clearing in the woods, perfectly circular, where no birds sang, and the wind refused to enter. In its center stood a black tree with bark like ash and roots that twisted into the ground like claws. Beneath it, a hole, not dug, but grown, as if the world itself had split open to expose something not meant to be seen. Sigmund stepped forward. The rune on his chest burned hot, glowing faintly beneath his leathers. Eric reached out. "Don't. I have to see." He descended. The air turned thick. The light above vanished after a few paces, and he lit a torch, the flame dim and reluctant. The passage spiraled downward, walls slick and cold. Whispers echoed around him, not in his ears, but in his mind. Names, faces, regrets, the dead. Then he emerged into a chamber, vast and hollow, lit by a strange pale glow. At its far end, a river flowed, not of water, but of mist. And on the other side stood the gate. It was not made of wood or iron, it was made of bones, thousands of them, fused together in a twisted arch. Upon it sat a figure, a wolf. No, not a wolf. Garma, guardian of Helheim. The beast's eyes were endless black pits. Blood dripped from its maw, and around its neck hung the keys to the gate. It growled, not out of rage, but out of warning. "I do not come to enter," Sigmund said, "only to see." The wolf did not move. Sigmund stepped closer. The whispers grew louder. Faces formed in the mist, some distorted by pain, others calm, with cold indifference. One face looked like Havard, another like Hrolf, another like the young shield maiden who had died in the ambush. And then he saw it. A vision, not of now, but of what could be. He saw himself, not on the battlefield, not at sea, but old and bent, dying in a bed of straw, alone. No sword, no glory, just a breath, then another, then silence, and the gates of hell opened. They welcomed him, not as a brother, not as a hero, as a forgotten soul. Sigmund staggered backward, heart racing. He turned, scrambled up the tunnel, out of the tree's roots, into the cold light of day. Eric caught him. "What did you see?" Sigmund collapsed to his knees. "My fate, if I stray." They camped that night, near the tree, neither speaking much. But Sigmund did not sleep. He stared at the stars, gripping his axe. He had seen the other side, the place where cowards went, where the dishonored were forgotten. And he vowed, with every breath he had left, that he would never walk those gates, even if he had to carve his way into Valhalla with blood and fire. The fire cracked in the center of the longhouse, and the smell of pine resin and roasting meat drifted through the timber rafters like smoke through a battlefield. Outside, winter howled, but inside the hall of Jarl Brynjar, warmth flowed with mead and song. It was a night of celebration. The war bands had returned, bloody, limping, triumphant. Sigmund sat near the fire, his eyes heavy but unyielding, his hands resting on the haft of his axe. Beside him, Eric drank deeply from a carved horn and roared along with the warriors. The air pulsed with life, raw, brutal, but sacred. Tonight was not a mere feast, it was a remembrance. 3 days earlier, they had buried the dead, 15 men who had fallen in battle against the Angles near the northern fjords. Now they feasted for them. This was tradition. This was sacred. To fight, to fall, and to be remembered in flame and feast. If the gods watched over men at all, it was in these moments, when war and joy stood side by side, and neither asked forgiveness from the other. A skald rose from the end of the hall, a thin man with silver hair and a harp carved from whalebone. He stood atop a bear pelt and began to sing, not of his own time, but of the old times, when Odin walked Midgard disguised as a wanderer, when Loki's lies had not yet cursed the gods, and when the Valkyries still rode freely across the battlefields of men. "Sing of the fallen," someone shouted. "Sing of Valhalla." The skald bowed. And so he sang of Sesrumnir, the great hall of Freyja, where half the battle dead were taken, and of Valhalla, Odin's hall, where warriors slain in combat trained for Ragnarok. He sang of the Valkyries, those fierce and beautiful maidens who chose the brave, plucking them from battlefields as wolves pluck lambs. He sang of the mead, brewed in goats' horns and served by golden-haired warriors to those who had died laughing. Sigmund closed his eyes. He could see it. He could feel it. In his mind, the wooden walls of the longhouse transformed into golden stone. The fire became a great hearth, 100 feet wide. The faces of the warriors shimmered and changed, no longer scarred men of flesh, but spectral forms, clothed in the glory of death. He stood among them, and he was no longer afraid. Suddenly, a voice called out across the hall, not in song, not in jest, but in challenge. "I say it is a lie." The hall fell silent. At the far end, a figure stepped forward, cloaked in furs, tall and lean, with dark braids and tattoos along his arms. His name was Sten the Black, a foreigner, once Saxon, now Norse, by oath, but not by blood. He'd fought with them, bled with them, but his soul had never truly belonged. "There is no hall in the sky," he said. "No Valkyrie waits for you. When you die, you die. No songs, no fire. Just the dirt." Gasps, then growls. But he didn't stop. "You speak of dying in battle like it's some golden gate. But I've seen men die screaming, broken, piss in their own blood. I've seen warriors cry for their mothers as they bled out. That's not glory, that's rot." Eric stood, fists clenched. "Watch your tongue," Sten sneered. "Or what? You'll kill me and send me to your fake heaven?" Sigmund rose, not with fury, not with hatred, but with purpose. He walked slowly to the center of the hall and faced Sten. The flames behind him cast long shadows across the floor. "I've seen hell," Sigmund said. Sten laughed, but it was nervous. "You saw smoke and dreams." "I saw the gate," Sigmund continued. "I saw what waits for those who die without honor. No songs, no mead, just the cold. Forever." "And did you see Valhalla too?" Sten mocked. "Did Odin pour you a horn of mead himself?" "No," Sigmund said, "but I've heard its echo." The words silenced even Sten. Sigmund turned to the others. "I do not care what he believes, because I believe, and I will live my life and meet my death as if the gods are watching." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. "And when the day comes, I will die on my feet, with my axe in my hand. And I will not go alone. I'll take a dozen souls with me. And if I'm wrong," Sigmund turned back to Sten, "then at least I died with fire in my blood, not fear in my gut." He sat, and the hall erupted. Eric clapped him on the back, laughing. Others raised their horns in salute. The skald began a new song, this time of Sigmund himself. It was exaggerated, foolish, full of details that hadn't happened. But none of that mattered. In Norse culture, legend was truth. To be sung of was to live forever. But that night, when the laughter died and the mead ran dry, Sigmund stood alone outside the longhouse, staring up at the moon. The wind was quiet. The trees did not sway. And then he saw her, the Valkyrie. She did not speak. She did not descend from the sky or carry a weapon. She only stood, watching him. He stepped forward. "Am I worthy yet?" he asked. She tilted her head. Then for the first time, she smiled. "You're close." Then she vanished into the snow. And Sigmund, son of Havard, warrior of the broken horns, believed, not just in Valhalla, but in the life he would live until he earned his place there. Snow melted into spring, and the rivers swelled with life once more. Where once the land was locked in frost and silence, now birds sang again, and green returned to the hills. But Sigmund felt no peace, not in the leaves, not in the thawing soil, not in the sun that warmed the earth like a forgotten fire. War still lived in his bones, and the gods were not yet done with him. He had faced death. He had glimpsed hell. He had stood in the smoke of funeral pyres and felt the breath of a Valkyrie on his neck. Yet something inside him still remained unanswered. A question born not from fear, but from curiosity. If Valhalla was real, if hell was real, then the gods must be real too. And if the gods were real, then where were they? Still chasing ghosts? Eric had asked one evening, watching his brother sketch strange runes into the dirt beside the fire. Sigmund hadn't answered. He didn't have to. The skalds spoke of it. The old ones whispered it before their final sleep. Somewhere in the wild heart of Midgard stood Yggdrasil, the world tree. Its roots ran through all the realms, through gods and men and the dead. Its branches touched the heavens, and at its base, wisdom pooled like dew on ancient bark. Some said Odin himself had hung from its limbs for 9 days and nights, pierced by a spear, sacrificing himself to himself. From that pain, he drew knowledge, runes, sight beyond sight, power. Sigmund wanted to see it, not for power, not for legend, but for answers. So he left the camp. Again. This time, Eric did not try to stop him. He walked alone, through deep forest and forgotten valleys, past ruins where moss grew over bones, and ancient statues watched him with blank stone eyes. Days passed, then weeks. His beard grew wild, his feet bled, but still he walked, until the forest changed. At first, it was the air, thicker, quiet not with silence, but with expectation. The trees here were older, gnarled and immense, their branches woven like a canopy so thick only green light filtered through. The ground pulsed with life beneath every step. And then one morning, he found it. Not a tree, the tree. It rose into the clouds, not tall, endless. Its trunk was wider than a longhouse. Its bark was grey and silver, and it shimmered with energy that seemed both alive and ancient. Roots like rivers coiled through the earth, and around its base were pools of water that reflected not just the sky, but memories. In them he saw himself, as a child, as a warrior, as a boy burning with questions. Sigmund dropped to his knees. This was Yggdrasil. He felt it before he heard it. The presence, a rustling, not of leaves, but of something deeper, ancient, a consciousness vast and indifferent. The tree did not speak with words. It did not need to. It simply was. And in its presence, Sigmund felt small, not unworthy, but human. Then came the raven. It landed on a low branch, black-feathered and gleaming, its eyes too intelligent to be of this world. It cawed once, then spoke. "You seek meaning." Sigmund froze. The bird had not moved its beak, yet the words had been clear inside his mind. "You seek glory, honor, purpose." "I seek truth," Sigmund whispered. "I've seen death. I've seen the gates of hell. I've seen the Valkyrie. But I do not understand why I was marked." The raven blinked. Odin sees. Odin chooses. But Odin does not explain. Sigmund clenched his fists. "Then I will ask you, what must I do to earn my place among the fallen chosen?" The raven tilted its head. "Die well. I know that," Sigmund snapped. "But what is dying well? Is it in fire, in battle, with honor, with rage?" The tree pulsed. The raven spoke again. "Dying well is not about death. It is about living well, living with courage, with sacrifice, with meaning." Sigmund stared up into the branches. "Will I see my father again? Perhaps. Will I see the gods?" "They are always with you," the raven said. "In wind, in flame, in steel." Sigmund stood. The pool before him shimmered. This time, it did not show his past, but a future. He saw himself standing on a battlefield surrounded by flame and ruin. He was older, stronger, his beard long and his eyes fierce. Around him lay fallen enemies, and before him stood creatures not of this world, twisted things of smoke and darkness. His axe burned with runes. His shield was shattered, but still he fought. And then, silence. The vision faded. The raven flapped its wings and landed on his shoulder. "You are close? To death? To glory?" Sigmund looked up at Yggdrasil. "Then I'm ready." The raven whispered, "The Valkyries will know." He turned back through the forest. The air behind him remained thick, charged, but he no longer felt the need to linger. He had stood at the roots of the world. He had looked into the pool of fate, and he had been seen. Days later, he returned to the Broken Horns. Eric welcomed him with a rough hug. "You still breathing?" "Barely." The camp had changed. War had come. A southern king, Harold the Black, had marched north with an army of Saxons and turncoat Norse. His plan was to unite the coast under one banner, his. The Broken Horns were now a resistance, holed up in the forest, planning raids, ambushes, and, soon, a final stand. "We ride at dawn," Ketil rasped from his furs. "One way or another, we end this." Sigmund simply nodded. That night, as the fire burned low, he looked up at the stars and whispered a name. Havard. He hoped his father was watching. He hoped the Valkyrie would return. And if not, then he would make them see. Dawn cracked like lightning across the horizon, casting a crimson glow over the frozen fields of Redfjord. It was an eerie light, less a sunrise and more a warning, a sky painted in blood. The warriors of the Broken Horns stood in a tight line at the base of the slope, wind tugging at their cloaks, frost clinging to their beards. Behind them, the fjord steamed where it met the cold morning air. Before them, the enemy gathered. Sigmund stood at the center of the formation, axe in hand, breath misting from his lips. The vision from the tree still burned in his mind, himself older, surrounded by the slain, still fighting. He didn't know if that moment was now or years away, but something in the wind told him this day mattered. This was not another raid. This was not survival. This was legacy. Jarl Ketil, propped on a makeshift sled beside Eric, his maimed arm now bound tight in leather, looked over the warriors and nodded. "This is the end, one way or another," he growled. "They outnumber us 3-1. But we are Norse. We are the wolves of the north. We do not run." A murmur passed through the warriors, low and grim. "You know what to do," he continued. "Strike hard, die well. If you fall today, make it glorious. Let the Valkyries fight each other for the right to carry you." Laughter rippled, brief, tense. Sigmund stepped forward. "They march for gold, for power," he said. "We fight for something more. We fight to be remembered. We fight to be sung about. If we die here, let it echo across the 9 realms. Let the gods take notice." Eric raised his sword. "To Valhalla! To Valhalla!" the warband roared. Then came the horns, low, bellowing like giants, echoing across the hills. The army of Harold the Black poured over the ridge, shields in tight formation, spears like a forest of iron. Their banners bore a twisted serpent, black on red, and at the center of their line rode Harold himself, tall, pale, draped in furs, his helm shaped like a dragon's skull. Harold raised his sword. "Break them," he cried. "No survivors." And the charge began. Sigmund did not wait. He roared, raised his axe, and ran. The Broken Horns followed, a wall of fury crashing into the enemy like a storm from the sea. The first impact was chaos, steel on steel, shield against shield. Sigmund drove his axe into a man's face, tore it free, blocked a spear, pivoted, struck again. Blood sprayed, screams rose. It was war in its truest form. He moved through it like a dancer, each step a memory, each strike a hymn to the gods. Around him, men fell. Eric's blade carved a path beside him. The enemy reeled under the fury of warriors who had already accepted death. That acceptance made them unstoppable. Then came the second wave. Fresh troops surged forward, and the broken horns began to falter. Sigmund was separated, surrounded. A spear nicked his side, a sword split his shield. He dropped it, seized a fallen man's, and kept fighting. Time blurred. Faces became smears of fear and rage. And then he saw her. Through the chaos, she appeared. The Valkyrie. Not a vision, not a dream. She walked through the battlefield untouched, cloaked in feathers, golden hair whipping in the wind, her eyes glowing like forge fires. She watched him, judged him, as if this was his moment, as if everything had led to this. A Saxon soldier lunged at him. Sigmund turned, parried, and drove his axe into the man's chest. Another came, then another. His arms ached. His blood poured freely now. He roared her name. Valhalla! He struck again, and again. The Valkyrie nodded, then disappeared into the mist. But her presence remained, and with it, something else. Clarity. He fought harder, moved faster. Each strike carved not just flesh, but fate. Around him, the broken horns were dying. Eric had taken a blow to the leg and was barely standing. Jarl Ketil was gone, dragged into the fray, his sled shattered. Yet the enemy line began to hesitate. Sigmund had become a force unto himself. Then he saw him. Harald the Black. The enemy Jarl had dismounted, and now advanced across the field, sword raised, eyes locked on Sigmund. The two men met in the center of the field. The battle around them seemed to fade. Noise dropped away, just breath, just snow, just blood on steel. "You're the one they whisper about," Harald said. "The one who sees ghosts." Sigmund raised his axe. "You're the one who'll meet them." Harald charged. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. Sigmund ducked, parried, struck low. Harald spun, slammed a pommel into his jaw. Sigmund reeled. Blood filled his mouth. He roared, drove forward, tackled the man into the snow. They rolled, fists flailing, blades scraping. At last, Sigmund's axe sank deep into Harald's shoulder. Harald shrieked. Sigmund yanked it free. Harald fell, dead. And at that moment the tide broke. The enemy, seeing their Jarl fall, lost heart. They faltered. Then they fled. The broken horns, barely 24 left standing, let them go. Sigmund dropped to his knees. His vision blurred. Blood poured from 12 wounds. His breath came ragged. The cold bit deeper now. Eric limped to him. "You did it." "No," Sigmund whispered. "We did." He looked skyward. The Valkyrie stood above him once more. Only now, she extended her hand. Not yet, he thought. Not yet. But soon. Very soon, she smiled. And he knew. When his moment came, when his final breath left him, it would not be the gates of hell that awaited. It would be the golden doors of Valhalla, swinging wide. And he would walk through them with his father at his side. A warrior, an Einherjar, a legend. The fires of Redfjord smoldered for 3 days. Victory had been bought with blood. Of the broken horns, fewer than 30 had survived. They gathered the dead in silence, wrapped them in linen, placed their weapons beside them, and burned them in great pyres by the edge of the water. The flames licked the skies, and smoke twisted into shapes that might have been wings or might have been memories. Sigmund stood before the largest pyre, the last to burn, where Jarl Ketil lay. He'd found Ketil after the battle, the old Jarl bleeding out, beneath a pile of corpses, a sword through his gut, and a grin on his face. He'd looked up at Sigmund and rasped, "Tell Odin I made him bleed." And then he died. Now the smoke carried him skyward, toward the halls of the gods. The warriors sang as the pyres burned, low guttural ancient songs that rose and fell like the waves of the northern sea. They sang not in grief, but in honor. Each name called out was not a farewell, but a summons to Valhalla, as if by voice alone they could guide the dead across the bridge of fire that led to eternity. When the last flame died, Sigmund walked alone to the water's edge. Eric approached behind him. His limp was worse now. He'd taken a spear through the calf and nearly bled out before the battle's end. But he stood tall beside his brother. "Will you go back?" Eric asked. "To Skjoldvik?" Sigmund didn't answer at first. Then he said, "No." "Then where?" He looked to the sea. "Wherever the gods lead me." Eric placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've already earned your place, Sigmund. You don't need to keep chasing it." But Sigmund shook his head. "It's not about earning it anymore. It's about understanding it." And so he left again. Not in exile, not in sorrow, in purpose. He traveled east, through the highlands and ravines, through forests where no songbirds lived, into mountains older than names. He met warriors along the way, some who joined him for a time, others who tested him with steel. He earned more scars, but with each passing day, something changed in him. He no longer fought for death. He fought for the meaning behind it. He listened to stories from every village, every clan. He sat with seers and wise women, broke bread with hermits who claimed to have spoken with Odin, and drank with madmen who dreamed of Yggdrasil. In the hills of Uppsala, he found what he didn't know he'd been searching for: a temple. It rose like bone from the earth, half buried, covered in ivy and snow. The roof had long since collapsed, but the central altar still stood. Carved from a single stone, it bore runes so ancient they predated the sagas. Sigmund brushed away the moss and snow and began to read. They told the story of Gleiheimer, the realm beyond Valhalla, where the gods themselves would gather after the twilight of the world. A place not of death, but of rebirth, of true honor, of final peace. And for the first time, Sigmund wondered, was Valhalla the end, or merely a passage? He stayed at the temple for 3 days, meditating, fasting, waiting for a sign. And on the 4th night, it came. Not as a voice, not as a Valkyrie, but as a vision. He stood in a field of stars. The sky above him, a swirling tapestry of gold and fire. Before him stood a vast hall, not Valhalla, something greater. Its walls were made of starlight, its roof, the night sky itself. He heard laughter, not of warriors, but of gods. And then came a voice, not from outside, but from deep within. "You were never meant only to fight." He turned, and there stood Havard, his father, not as he remembered him, not just a warrior, but a spirit of something more. Light shimmered around him, and his face was younger, unburdened. "You've done well," Havard said. "You've lived well." Sigmund fell to his knees. "I've searched so long. I thought I had to die, with steel in my hands to find you again." Havard nodded. "You still will. But death is not the only way to honor. Understanding, wisdom, sacrifice. These too are weapons." Sigmund looked up, tears in his eyes. "Then what do I do now?" "Live," his father said. "Live until you must die. And when that day comes, die like the man you are. Not just a warrior, but a soul shaped by the gods themselves." The vision faded. Sigmund awoke on the temple floor, the stars above him, and for the first time in years, he felt stillness inside him. Not silence, stillness. He rose and carved a rune into the altar, not for battle, but for truth. Then he gathered his axe, his cloak, and descended from the mountain. In the years that followed, stories spread. Of a warrior who wandered not to conquer, but to teach. Of a man who spoke to gods and spirits and never lied. Of a Norseman who never fled battle, but who also knew when to walk away. Some called him mad, Others called him touched by Odin. Children whispered that he had already died once and returned only because Valhalla itself had sent him back. But in time, he was known by one name alone, Sigmund the Seen. And one night, many winters later, after countless battles and 100 feasts, Sigmund felt the wind shift. He stood alone at the edge of a cliff, watching the aurora dance across the sky. He smiled. "I'm ready," he whispered. He closed his eyes. And this time, when he opened them, the Valkyrie was not watching from afar. She stood before him. She reached out her hand, and Sigmund took it. His body fell where he stood, axe in hand, but his spirit rose, and through the northern sky, lit by stars and fire, he rode. To a golden hall, to his father, to the gods, to the feast of the fallen, to eternity. The winds howled across the northern sky, but Sigmund heard only silence. He no longer felt the weight of flesh, the ache of old wounds, or the bite of cold. His feet did not touch the earth, and yet he moved forward, not walking, not floating, but crossing. All around him stretched a vast black void, not dark in color, but dark in feeling. A space between life and death, between memory and legend. Ahead, rising from the mist, came a great bridge. It arched impossibly high, built of blades. Thousands upon thousands of swords, axes, and spears fused together in shimmering silver. Some were ancient and rusted, others gleamed with freshly spilt blood. They belonged to the fallen, men and women who had died in battle and been chosen. Each weapon bore a name etched in runes. Those of warriors, of shield maidens, of kings, and nameless sons who had bled their last beneath foreign skies. This was Jalabru, the bridge of reckoning, the path between the world of men and the realm of gods. And waiting at its threshold stood a figure cloaked in feathers, the Valkyrie, not the spectre of dreams who had watched him from afar, not the mirage from smoke and sleep, but real, present. She stood with her helm in hand, her hair woven with bones and golden rings, her face ageless, yet fierce. "Sigmund," she said, her voice echoing without sound. He inclined his head. "Am I ready?" "You are," she replied. "But understand this. The journey is not yet over. The bridge tests all, not in battle, but in memory." Sigmund stepped forward, and the bridge lit beneath his feet. Each blade sang, a high, ringing tone that thrummed through his bones. With each step he took, a memory played before him as if cast in mist. Moments from his life rising in shimmering visions around him. He saw his childhood in Skjoldvik, the days spent chasing shadows with Eric, his father training him with the blunt end of an axe, the fire, the loss. Then came the early battles, the broken horns, the duel with Ulf, the storm on the coast, his first kill, the first time he tasted fear, and the first time he overcame it. Every step cut deeper, not into his body, but into his soul. For with each memory came pain. He saw Hrolf's dying breath, Ketil's blood-soaked grin, the shield maiden who bled out in his arms, her eyes wide and empty. He saw Sten the Black, and wondered again if that cynicism was ever rooted in truth. He walked past them all. Then came the questions. From the mist emerged his own reflection, dressed in bone-white mail, carrying an axe that mirrored his own. "Why do you deserve Valhalla?" it asked. "Because I fought for more than death," Sigmund answered. "I fought for meaning." "You killed," the reflection said. "More than most." "I did," Sigmund admitted, "but not in hatred, not in glory-seeking. I killed because the world required it of me, because survival required it, because my people did." "Would you do it again?" Sigmund hesitated. "Yes, but I would carry the memory, as I always have." The reflection stepped aside. The bridge continued. Now the mist showed others. Not friends, not family, but strangers. Children hiding in burning villages. Enemy soldiers dying slowly. Mothers screaming over sons. The consequence of war. Sigmund fell to his knees. "I did this," he whispered. The Valkyrie stepped beside him. "And still you are chosen." "Why?" he asked, voice cracked. "Because remorse is not weakness. Because to feel the pain of your enemy is to understand the weight of your blade. Odin favors those who do not kill blindly, but who bear the cost." Sigmund stood again and walked. As he reached the highest arch of the bridge, the air grew thinner, charged with ancient power. The blades beneath his feet no longer cut, they carried. The mist cleared, and there it was. Valhalla, a hall the size of a mountain, its gates forged of sunlight and carved with every name ever sung in song. The roof glittered with golden shields. Its walls were made of wood from the roots of Yggdrasil itself, shaped by storms and fire. Great horns rose from its towers, and the sound of drums thundered from within. On the plain before it stood 1,000 warriors, men and women of every age, their eyes burning with joy and rage and glory. They watched Sigmund approach, and one by one, they raised their weapons in salute. And there, at the gates, stood Havard, alive, glowing, his beard braided, his axe slung on his back, his eyes proud. "Come, son," he called, "the feast awaits." Sigmund's breath caught. He stepped forward, but was stopped. The Valkyrie stood before him again. "One last question," she said. Sigmund nodded. "Do you enter as a warrior or as a man?" He blinked, then he smiled. "As both." She stepped aside. The gates opened. Music poured forth, battle drums, horns, the deep chant of thousands singing in a language older than time. Inside, the hall was filled with the smoke of roasted boar and the laughter of immortals. Shields hung like banners. Every table overflowed with meat and mead. Sigmund entered. He was no longer tired, no longer hunted, no longer lost. He had crossed the bridge. He had answered the call. He had become legend. And as the gates closed behind him, another name was etched into the walls of Valhalla: Sigmund the Seen, warrior of the end, voice of the gods, a man who fought not only with his hands, but with his heart. Valhalla pulsed with eternal dusk, lit not by sun or fire, but by a warm golden radiance that seemed to seep from the walls, the tables, the laughter of the dead. The roof, high as a mountain peak, bore shields of every shape and clan, arranged in perfect rows, as if placed by Odin himself. The long hearth blazed down the center, its flames blue and white, casting dancing shadows of warriors who no longer aged. Sigmund stood at the threshold, staring in awe. His axe, once heavy with blood and memory, now shimmered clean upon his back. His wounds were gone. His beard had thickened, his shoulders broadened, but not in a mortal sense. He had been remade in spirit, not just in flesh. Around him, the feast of the fallen roared. A table to his left erupted in cheer as two warriors wrestled atop it, knocking over horns of mead and plates piled high with venison and roasted fowl. Another warrior, tall as a pine tree with a voice like thunder, rose to recite a tale of his death in battle against a frost giant. Laughter followed, and someone threw a roasted apple that burst in flame mid-air, striking a golden helm with a hollow thud. Sigmund stepped forward. Havard, waiting with arms crossed, at the base of a column carved with runes of the Aesir, gave a nod of satisfaction. "I always knew you'd make it," he said. Sigmund smiled almost shyly. "I wasn't always sure." "You were always being watched," Havard said, "even before you knew it." Together they walked past tables overflowing with warriors. Some stood mid-battle, frozen in joy as they relived their deaths with wild gestures. Others whispered stories over mugs of steaming ale. Shield maidens danced, their voices like wind and steel. And in the corner of the hall, a massive bear napped, with its paw draped over the body of a laughing berserker. "This is not what I expected," Sigmund said. "No one does," Havard replied, "and yet it's always exactly what it needs to be." They passed into a quieter corner of the hall, where the noise dimmed to a low, rhythmic hum. Here sat a circle of warriors, old and new, their armor blackened, their eyes bright. At the center burned a low, white flame, a different sort of fire, the kind that didn't warm flesh, but spirit. "Who are they?" Sigmund asked. Havard gestured toward the circle, those who died asking the right questions. He recognized some of them, faces he'd seen on the battlefield, figures from old skaldic poems, names whispered in the halls of his childhood. One of them turned, an old woman with a long braid and a sword forged of ice and fire. Her eyes, golden and sharp, met his. "You are the one who walked the tree," she said. "I am. You crossed the gates of hell and returned." "I did. You came not just to die, but to understand." Sigmund hesitated. "Yes." She nodded and motioned for him to sit. And for hours, perhaps days, they spoke. Of fate, of sacrifice, of how the gods chose, and why. They spoke of how Valhalla was not the reward, but a responsibility. Every warrior here was not just honored. They were training for the final battle, for Ragnarok. "But if all things end," Sigmund asked, "then what does it matter how we live?" A bearded warrior who had once been king smiled. "Because what you do before the end shapes what comes after it." Another chimed in, his voice deep. "The gods will fall, the world will burn, but it will be reborn. And who survives to tell its story, who deserves to, must first learn how to live, how to die, and how to fight without hate." It was not what Sigmund expected, but it was what he needed to hear. In the days that followed, he trained, not with weapons, but with memory. He relived his battles through fire dreams. Each time, a new lesson surfaced. He'd swing his axe in the golden courtyard outside the hall. His opponent sometimes Havard, sometimes a stranger, sometimes his younger self. One day, as he sat atop the ramparts of Valhalla staring out across the field of the honored, he saw a figure he hadn't seen since the ambush at River Wye. Eric, his brother. Sigmund raced down the steps, but Eric's eyes were dim. His body, though whole, seemed burdened. "What happened?" Sigmund asked. "I died 2 winters after you," Eric said. "I tried to hold the village, but the raiders were too many. I held until the last child escaped." Sigmund placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you died well." Eric shook his head. "But I died angry, cursing the gods. And yet you're here." "I didn't understand until I passed the Bridge of Blades," Eric said. "I had to face what I had become. But then I saw you, saw your fire." They embraced again, and for the first time, Sigmund felt that his journey was no longer his alone. They would walk this new path together. That evening, a new voice called through Valhalla. It silenced the laughter, stilled the drums. And every warrior turned to see Odin standing at the head of the feast. He was not what the skalds described, not the booming, spear-wielding storm god of war, but an old man with a raven on each shoulder, one eye gleaming like a distant star. He looked at Sigmund and Eric, at Havard, at the woman with the sword of ice and fire, at them all. "The time grows near," he said. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The wolf stirs, the fire giant sharpens his blade, and we must be ready." He raised a horn of mead. "To the worthy dead," and every voice in Valhalla echoed him. "To the worthy dead." The hall thundered, mead flowed, music returned. But now Sigmund felt something new, a calling. He was not done. Not yet. Valhalla was not his end, it was his beginning. The endless halls of Valhalla thrummed with the pulse of eternal life, the clanging of swords, the roar of laughter, the ceaseless clash of battle as the chosen warriors fought and feasted, day after endless day. Yet beneath the veneer of celebration and camaraderie, a quiet shadow slithered among the revelry. It was a whisper carried on the chill northern winds that seeped even into this golden realm, a reminder that all things, even the gods themselves, were destined to end. Sigmund walked the great hall, the weight of his axe familiar and comforting on his back. But the fire in his heart flickered with a restless flame. He had come here to find honor and peace, but instead, the prophecies of doom clung to his thoughts, like frost to winter branches. Odin's words haunted him, spoken with grim certainty during the last great feast. The time grows near, not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The wolf stirs, the fire giant sharpens his blade, and we must be ready. The words were more than prophecy. They were a summons. Seeking counsel, Sigmund wandered to the sacred alcove of the honored dead, where the oldest and wisest warriors gathered. Here, beneath ancient carvings of Yggdrasil's sprawling limbs, skalds told the old stories anew, tales of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. The final battle that would shake all the 9 realms, where skies would burn, oceans would flood, and the very fabric of the world would unravel before being woven again. The shield maiden Freydis stepped forward, her voice low and steady, resonating with the weight of ages. Fenrir, the monstrous wolf, will break his iron chains and devour Odin himself. Surtur, lord of the fire giants, will wield his flaming sword and burn the earth to ash. The stars will fall from the heavens, the seas will roar in rage, and even the mighty gods will fall in blood and flame. The warriors around the hall exchanged grim looks. There was no laughter in this telling, only sober acceptance. This was the truth they lived for. They were not merely warriors. They were the eternal guardians who would fight alongside gods until the end of days. Sigmund felt a chill that was not from the cold air. He understood the deeper cost of his afterlife. This was no paradise, but a preparation ground for destruction and rebirth. "I will fight in the final battle," Sigmund said quietly, standing tall amid the murmurs. "But what awaits after? What will remain?" From the shadows emerged Urd, one of the Norns, the fateful weavers of destiny. Her silver eyes gleamed like moonlight on steel, and her voice was soft yet undeniable. "After the flames of Ragnarok, there will be rebirth," she said, stepping forward. "The world will rise anew from the ashes of the old. But this new world depends on what we do now, on the choices we make, the courage we show, and the sacrifices we bear. Fate is not a path, but a web, fragile and ever-shifting." Sigmund bowed his head. "Then we must prepare, not just for death, but for the life that comes beyond." She smiled with ancient wisdom. "And so it shall be. Even the gods are bound by fate, but they do not surrender. They fight to protect what is yet to come." Days stretched on in relentless training and solemn counsel. Sigmund sparred beneath the watchful eyes of the great gods, Thor, thunderous and wild, wielding Mjolnir with devastating might. Freya, fierce and graceful, her battle fury tempered by wisdom. Tyr, the one-handed god who sacrificed so much, his scars telling a story of boundless courage. Yet even as swords clashed and shields shattered, Sigmund's thoughts drifted to Midgard, to Eric, his brother, to the village they had defended and lost, to the lives woven into his past. He understood at last that this afterlife was not a reward, but a duty, an eternal commitment stand at the gates of the world's end. One night, beneath the shimmering curtain of the northern lights that danced across Valhalla's vast ceiling, Sigmund dreamed. The dream was vivid and felt more real than waking life. He found himself standing at the roots of Yggdrasil once again, the world tree shuddering as if in agony. The sky darkened. Thunder rolled from distant realms. The earth trembled beneath the coming storm of fate. Beside him appeared the Valkyrie who had guided him before, a warrior of radiant power, her golden hair braided with feathers and runes, her gaze both fierce and compassionate. "Are you ready, Sigmund?" she asked, her voice ringing like a bell across the trembling land. He gripped his axe tightly. "For whatever comes." She smiled, a mixture of pride and sorrow. "Then rise, Einherjar. The final battle awaits." Suddenly, the ground beneath him cracked open, and he was swept forward on a tide of fire and shadow. He awoke with a start, the sound of horns thundering through Valhalla's great halls. The summons, the final call. The battle for the fate of all worlds had begun. The sound of the Yala horn shattered the stillness of Valhalla like a lightning bolt splitting the sky. Its deep, resonant call rolled through the vaulted halls, bounced off the golden shields, and carried across the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree that bound all 9 realms. Every warrior, every shield maiden, every Einherjar froze mid-gesture, mid-laugh, mid-strike, and then rose as one, a tide of steel and fire moving toward the great gates. Sigmund felt the horn's vibrations deep in his bones, a call that stirred something ancient and eternal within him. It was a summons that no mortal or immortal could refuse. The final battle was at hand. Around him, the warriors of Valhalla gathered, their faces set like carved stone, eyes burning with the mixture of excitement, fear, and solemn acceptance. They did not cheer, they did not waver, they prepared. Sigmund's gaze met that of Havard, his father, standing tall and unbowed. Time had long since faded between them. Here, in the halls of the gods, they were brothers in arms again. "We ride to Vigrid," Havard said, gripping his battle axe tightly, the runes carved into its haft glowing faintly. "The field where destiny awaits us all." The sound of his voice carried the weight of countless battles fought and lost, and the hope for a future reborn. The Einherjar joined by the gods themselves, Thor with his hammer Mjolnir sparking with lightning, Freya clad in her battle furs, Tyr the one-handed with unwavering courage, formed a host like no other. The earth beneath Valhalla trembled as the warriors surged forward, stepping through the golden gates into the endless expanse of the cosmos. Outside, the skies had darkened. Clouds roiled, swirling like storms summoned by ancient wrath. Thunder cracked like the roar of a great beast, lightning splitting the heavens with savage light. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, brimstone, and the raw power of impending destruction. The journey to the field of Vigrid was no mere march. It was a crossing of realms, a passage through the shadows where few dared to tread. They rode through mists that whispered voices, prayers, curses, promises from those who had fallen and waited for this final day. At times, the landscape shifted like a dream, rivers of icy water that burned like fire, forests where trees groaned as if alive and watching, and fields of bones stretching to infinity. The land itself seemed to mourn the coming end. Sigmund felt the steady presence of the Valkyrie beside him. She moved like a flame in the darkness, silent, relentless, her golden hair whipping in the storm's breath. Her eyes, pools of ancient wisdom, never left the horizon. Together, they crossed the black river Jol, where the dead lingered between worlds, the chilling sound of its waters a dirge for the fallen. They passed the gates of hell, where restless spirits stirred uneasily, watching but forbidden from leaving until fate's final reckoning. Finally, before them stretched the vast plain of Vigrid, an endless field bathed in an eerie twilight. The ground was scarred and churned, littered with broken weapons and shattered shields that told tales of battles long forgotten. And waiting on the far side of the field was Fenrir, the monstrous wolf whose jaws would one day swallow Odin whole. His massive form towered over the plains, muscles rippling beneath fur black as the void. His eyes burned with unquenchable fury. Beside Fenrir stood Surtur, lord of the fire giants, his flaming sword a beacon of destruction. His very breath scorched the air, and wherever he stepped, the earth blackened and cracked. Shadowed and serpentine, Loki, the trickster and father of chaos, hovered nearby, weaving dark magic that twisted the very air, sowing confusion and fear. The ground trembled beneath their feet. From the host of Valhalla, the warriors raised their weapons in a thunderous roar that shook the heavens themselves. Shields clanged, axes sang, and horns blasted war cries that echoed across the realms. Sigmund felt the raw storm of fate surge through him like wildfire. Every scar, every loss, every breath taken had led him to this moment. He tightened his grip on his axe, its runes glowing brighter, humming with the power of countless battles. Beside him, Eric's eyes burned with fierce determination, their bond forged anew in the face of oblivion. "Together," Sigmund whispered. Eric nodded, a fierce grin breaking his battle-worn face. The Valkyrie raised her spear to the sky, and time seemed to slow. Then, with a cry that shattered the silence, the warriors charged. The clash was cataclysmic. Steel against fang, fire against shield, magic against might. The earth shook beneath their feet. The sky split open with the fury of gods and monsters alike. Sigmund fought like a man possessed, each swing of his axe a prayer, each parry a promise to the gods and to his fallen kin. Around him, the battle raged, a storm of violence and valor. He saw Thor locked in combat with the fire giant Surtur, lightning crackling with every strike. He saw Freya rallying shield maidens against the twisted shapes of Loki's magic. He saw Fenrir's jaws snap shut on Tyr's arm, the god fighting with single-handed fury. The fate of the world hung in the balance. And in the heart of the storm, Sigmund carved his own legend. The very earth beneath Vigrid quaked with the weight of impending doom, as if the world itself groaned beneath the clash of gods and monsters. The sky above was a swirling tempest of ash and flame, lightning cleaving the heavens in jagged bolts that momentarily illuminated the hellish battlefield below. Sigmund stood amid the chaos, every breath ragged with exertion, every sinew screaming for respite, yet his spirit burned fiercer than any flame Surtur could wield. Around him, the air thrummed with the cacophony of war, the grinding of swords against shields, the roar of beasts torn asunder, the crackle of fiery destruction. The warriors of Valhalla moved as a single relentless tide, carving a path through Loki's twisted legions. Grotesque abominations born from shadows and malice, each shrieking curses and lies as their shattered forms fell to the blood-streaked earth. Sigmund swung his axe in wide, devastating arcs, the enchanted blade glowing faintly with runes that seemed to burn brighter in the infernal light. Each strike was a prayer and a promise to his fallen kin, to Odin, and to the fragile hope that beyond this devastation, something new might yet be born. Beside him, Eric moved with ferocious precision, his sword flashing like a silver serpent as he cut down the enemy. The years of hardship, the bitter losses, had forged them both into warriors shaped by fire and sorrow. Together, they fought as brothers once more, bound by blood and unyielding resolve. The battlefield stretched endlessly, an ocean of death and fury beneath a sky torn asunder. Far across the plain, thunder shattered the air as Thor met Surtur in a clash that shook the very foundations of the cosmos. The hammer Mjolnir blazed with divine power, meeting the inferno of Surtur's sword in sparks that rained like shooting stars. The ground cracked and hissed where their blows landed, rivers of molten lava, carving new scars into the earth. Near them, Freya's war cry pierced the din, rallying shield maidens who fought with the grace of storm winds and the fury of winter's bite. They danced through the chaos, their blades singing the songs of battle and honor. Tyr, the one-handed god of war, fought with relentless courage, his missing hand a symbol of sacrifice that lent him strength beyond mortal ken. Even as Fenrir's massive jaws snapped shut upon him, Tyr gritted his teeth, holding the wolf's fury at bay with the ferocity of a cornered beast. Sigmund's eyes locked on Fenrir, the monstrous wolf towering like a living nightmare. The creature's fur shimmered with the darkness of the void, its breath a gale of frost and death. It tore through the ranks of gods and warriors alike, jaws dripping with the blood of fallen heroes. Yet even in the face of such overwhelming terror, Sigmund felt a steady flame of defiance ignite within. He charged toward the monstrous beast, axe raised high. His voice rang out, steady and fierce. "Father," he cried. Havard emerged from the maelstrom, axe meeting axe in a clash that sent sparks flying. The father and son fought side by side, their movements a symphony of skill and strength honed through years of battle. Around them, the war surged like a living storm, an endless cycle of death and defiance. But even as Sigmund pressed forward, the shadows twisted darker, and time seemed to fracture. In a moment of silence amidst the chaos, Sigmund found himself face to face with Loki, the trickster god whose cunning and malice had twisted fate itself. Loki's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement, shadows swirling about him like a living cloak. His smile was sharp, a razor edge of mockery. "Do you truly believe you can stop what is coming?" Loki whispered, voice dripping with scorn. "The world is doomed to burn, warrior. Your efforts are but fleeting sparks against the endless night." Sigmund's grip tightened on his axe, the runes glowing fiercely. He met Loki's gaze, unflinching. "I fight not for forever," he said through clenched teeth, "but for what comes after, for the world reborn." With a roar, Sigmund launched himself at the trickster, the clash of their weapons ringing like thunder across the plain. Loki moved with impossible speed, his blades striking like venomous serpents, but Sigmund held firm, parrying and countering with strength born of unbreakable will. Around them, the battle raged with renewed fury. Gods and monsters locked in desperate combat, the air thick with the smell of blood, smoke, and ancient power. Lightning blazed, fire roared. The earth trembled as the fate of all realms was decided in this brutal dance of destruction. As they fought, Sigmund's mind flashed with memories, the faces of those he loved and lost, the lessons of honor and sacrifice taught by his father, the voices of the Valkyrie who guided him across worlds. All these fueled his strength, a beacon in the consuming darkness. Loki sneered, twisting through a flurry of strikes, his magic warping the very air around them. "You cannot change fate, Sigmund," he hissed. "You can only delay the inevitable." Sigmund's eyes blazed with determination. "Then I will fight until my last breath. And if the world must end, I will ensure that when it rises again, it is worthy." Their blades met again in a shower of sparks, the sound echoing like a battle hymn. The clash was far from over. The skies above the plain of Vigrid were ablaze, a cataclysmic canvas painted with blood-red clouds and fiery streaks of molten gold. The heavens themselves seemed to weep ash and flame as the world trembled on the precipice of its final fate. Thunder rolled like the drums of doom, shaking mountains and seas alike, while the howling winds carried the cries of countless fallen souls. Sigmund's breath came ragged, each inhale sharp with the metallic taste of blood and the acrid sting of smoke. His body was battered and scarred, limbs heavy with exhaustion, yet beneath the fatigue burned a relentless fire, an ember of unyielding will that refused to be snuffed out by death or despair. His axe, once a tool of mortal battle, now pulsed with the power of ages, glowing faintly with the runes of ancient protection and vengeance. Around him, the battlefield was chaos incarnate, a maelstrom of light and shadow, fire and fury. The clash of gods and giants echoed like the roar of a dying world, the earth itself torn and bleeding beneath their feet. The grass was scorched, the rivers boiled, and the air thickened with the smoke of burning forests and the scent of spilled blood. Thor, the Thunderer, hurled Mjolnir with divine fury, the hammer striking Surtur's flaming blade in a shower of sparks that lit the battlefield like stars fallen to earth. The fire giant roared in defiance, his flaming sword carving blazing arcs that consumed all in their path. Beside them, Freyja led the shield maidens in a whirlwind of steel and spirit, their cries piercing the din with the fierce beauty of battle song. Tyr, despite his missing hand, grappled with Fenrir, the monstrous wolf whose jaws were wide and hungry, poised to end the reign of gods and men alike. But even as the great battle raged, a shadow deeper than any flame crept across the horizon. The world's final hour had come. With a roar that shook the cosmos, Fenrir broke free from the bonds that had held him since time immemorial. His massive form blotted out the sun, eyes burning with fury and hunger. With a thunderous snap, his jaws closed around Odin, the All-Father, the wise and weary wanderer. Odin's cry, a sound of infinite pain and defiance, echoed through the realms as he was swallowed whole. A silence deeper than the grave fell upon the battlefield. Warriors halted mid-strike, breath caught in their throats. Even the gods faltered as the heart of their order was torn away. The earth beneath them trembled as Surtur unleashed his inferno, rivers of lava spreading like veins of fire through the broken land. The skies blazed red, and the stars vanished, swallowed by the encroaching shadow. Yet amidst the despair, a spark of defiance ignited within Sigmund's soul. He raised his axe high, its ancient runes flaring with light that cut through the darkness like a beacon. "For those who have fallen," he shouted, voice ringing like a war horn. "For the world that will rise, we fight." A chorus of voices rose around him, fierce and unyielding. The warriors of Valhalla rallied, their spirits rekindled by the fire of hope amidst the ruins. Sigmund charged forward, each step a testament to unbreakable resolve. Around him, the battle surged like a tidal wave, a desperate storm of courage, sacrifice, and eternal struggle. He caught sight of Eric, his brother, wounded but unbowed, their eyes locking in a silent vow. No matter the cost, they would stand firm until the very end. The clash of steel and the roar of battle swelled as Sigmund faced Loki once more. The trickster's cruel smile was a blade sharper than any forged by mortal hands, shadows swirling and twisting like living serpents. "You cannot change what is destined," Loki sneered, weaving deceit and darkness. "The world must burn, and all must fall." Sigmund steadied his grip, the glow of his axe reflecting his burning heart. "Then I will be the flame that guides the rebirth." Their blades met in a shower of sparks, light and shadow entwined in eternal conflict. The sound of their battle was a hymn of defiance against the consuming night. As the world crumbled and fell, Sigmund understood at last. Valhalla was not a resting place, but a forge. From the ashes of destruction, a new world would rise, shaped by the courage and sacrifice of those who fought until the last breath. And so, amidst ruin and flame, Sigmund fought, his spirit a beacon piercing the darkness, a promise that even the darkest night must yield to dawn. The clash of gods and monsters, the roar of thunder, the blazing fires that had engulfed the sky, all of it had passed into silence. Vigrid, the vast battlefield that had seen the end of the worlds, lay still beneath a sky tinged with the faintest glow of dawn. The crimson hue of the night was slowly replaced by the soft golden light of a newborn sun. Fragile and tentative but promising, Sigmund stood alone at the edge of the great field, his breath shallow, his body bruised and battered from the endless battle. His armor bore the scars of 1,000 blows, dents and scratches that spoke of ferocity and endurance. Yet in his eyes, fierce and unwavering, burned the fire of life, defiant even in the face of destruction. All around him lay the remnants of the apocalypse. The earth was torn and scorched, a scarred mosaic of blackened soil and shattered weapons. The rivers ran red with blood, now cooling and settling beneath a blanket of ash. The forests that once stretched across Midgard lay twisted and charred, their great trees snapped like twigs by the wrath of the fire giants. Yet amidst the ruin, the great world tree, Yggdrasil, stood tall. Its mighty limbs, though battered and bruised, remained unbroken, reaching skyward as if shielding the fragile threads of existence. Its roots dug deep into the earth, clutching the very fabric of the cosmos, a living symbol of endurance and renewal. Sigmund's thoughts drifted, heavy with the memories of the long struggle, the endless days and nights of battle, the comrades lost, and the gods who had fallen. Odin, the All-Father, who had sacrificed himself to hold back the wolf Fenrir, had vanished beneath the beast's jaws, his absence a hollow wound in the hearts of all. Thor, bloodied but unbowed, stood among the survivors, his mighty hammer Mjolnir still sparking with the last echoes of thunder. Freya, her golden hair matted and her eyes fierce with determination, rallied the shield maidens, their spirits unbroken despite the devastation. Tyr, the one-handed god of war, bore his wounds with pride, a living testament to sacrifice and courage. Beside Sigmund was Eric, his brother-in-arms, whose face was streaked with soot and sweat, but whose gaze was as steadfast as ever. Their bond had been tempered in the fires of Ragnarok, forged anew through shared struggle and loss. Around them gathered the warriors who remained, gods and Einherjar alike, faces marked by grief but illuminated by hope. They knew the world had ended, but in that ending lay the seed of a new beginning. The Valkyrie who had guided Sigmund throughout his journey approached quietly, her armor gleaming in the first light of day. Her eyes, ancient and wise, held the calm certainty of fate fulfilled. "The end was never the end, Sigmund," she said softly. "Death is a passage, not a destination. From destruction, life is born anew. The world you fought for will rise again, brighter and stronger." Sigmund nodded, the weight of his years of fighting and loss settling upon him like a mantle he was finally ready to bear. "We fought for more than victory," he replied, voice steady despite the exhaustion that tugged at his limbs. "We fought so that what was lost could be made whole again, so that life would continue." The survivors looked to the horizon, where the sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of the long night. The cold winds began to soften, the air warming with promise. In that light, the rivers began to clear. The forests whispered with the gentle voices of new growth, and the earth itself seemed to breathe once more. Sigmund's gaze drifted over the battlefield, where countless weapons lay broken and countless bodies rested in eternal silence. Among them were heroes who had died with honor, the Einherjar, the chosen warriors who had welcomed death in combat, assured of their place in Valhalla. Yet beyond the honor and glory, Sigmund understood something deeper. Valhalla was not merely a hall of feasting and endless battle. It was a crucible of purpose, a forge where the souls of the brave were tempered for the ultimate sacrifice. Their fight was eternal, not only in life, but in death, bound to the cycle of destruction and rebirth. He thought of the tales sung by the skalds, the ancient stories of gods and men intertwined, of heroes who defied fate and forged their own destinies. These stories would now carry forward the memory of this great ending and the hope of new beginnings. Turning to Eric, Sigmund clasped his brother's shoulder. "We will tell their stories," he said. "We will honor their sacrifice, and we will build the world they dreamed of, a world where courage and honor endure." Eric's eyes gleamed with fierce pride. "And we will stand ready if the darkness ever returns." Sigmund smiled, feeling the warmth of kinship and purpose in the cold morning air. Around them, the surviving warriors began to gather in quiet groups, speaking softly of home, of those they had lost, and the future they would help shape. Some knelt in silent prayer to the gods they still revered, while others sang the old songs, their voices weaving a tapestry of remembrance and hope. The Valkyrie stood beside Sigmund once more, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke of the cycles to come. "The world will turn again, Sigmund. The seasons will change. The rivers will flow. Life will rise from the ashes of what was. And the brave, those who died with honor, will guide the living with their strength." He looked once more to the sky, where the sun now bathed the earth in warm light. The cold night was over. The long shadows of destruction were fading. In their place, the promise of dawn, the chance to rebuild, to renew, and to remember. Sigmund raised his axe high, the blade catching the sunlight and sending a shard of light across the field. For the fallen, he vowed, for the living, for the world yet to come. Around him, the voices of the brave rose in unison, a chorus of hope that echoed across the realms. The saga of Ragnarok had ended, but the story, the great saga of gods, warriors, and the eternal dance of life and death, would live on forever. The morning stretched on, filled with the quiet strength of survivors who knew that even after the greatest darkness, the light would always return. Sigmund and his brothers in arms turned their faces to the future, ready to meet whatever dawn might bring. The end was but the beginning.